Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call to order the special council meeting called for this evening, the evening of Monday, March 28th, for the purpose of dealing with the Southwest Quadrant Renewal Plan. This meeting has been called in the evening to enable people who wanted to attend to be able to attend, to be able to delegate, to be able to see, and that's why we're here in the open, in the public, as we were at a very large town hall meeting throughout the process and many other meetings where we've been here. So this evening, what we normally do with evening and special meetings, we don't have the Lord's Prayer and O Canada, but that will occur, of course, on Wednesday, March 30, which is the regularly scheduled council meeting. So what I'm going to do is move the council meeting forward. There is one item on the agenda. There is an opportunity for delegations. There will be a presentation. So we start with a motion to approve the agenda. And start with attendance. Pardon me, I've already turned the first page. This evening is also televised on Rogers Cable 10 to enable all Bramptonians to be able to see the proceedings and the comments and the dialogue this evening. The roll call, all members of council are present except for City Councillor Callahan, who is on vacation. This evening, then, we have a motion to approve the agenda. It is moved by Councillor Gibson and Councillor Dillon, and the agenda is a motion to be approved with the addition of 5 delegations. There were 2 delegations who had put their name in previously, but as is the common and always practice of council, when a matter is on the agenda and people wish to be added at the council meeting, we typically add to speak to those items. So the delegations that pre-submitted were Mr. Stephen Rhodes on behalf of the Brampton Board of Trade and Mr. Christopher Bejnar, who is a Brampton resident. Added tonight are Mr. J. Douglas Bryden, a Brampton resident, Mr. Don Naylor, representing the Downtown Business Development Corporation and business owner and Brampton resident, Mr. Michael J. Luchensky, who is a partner with Lawrence Stevenson, who is a resident downtown business, Mr. Ed Upenix, partner Lawrence Stevenson, who is a resident and downtown business person, and Ms. Susan LaBerge, who is a Brampton resident. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there were some people who may have wanted to speak to this that didn't get on the agenda, and I know because we've added these other 5 people who were late that maybe we should give an opportunity to anybody that's here tonight to come down. So I'd like to ask if you could at this time ask if anybody would like to speak, and I'd like to move that we'd add them to the agenda to speak tonight if they wanted to.
Well,
I don't know if anybody wants
if
to.
If you're being added tonight, you're not late. This is business as usual in Brampton. At a council meeting, people do come forward and they address the clerk. They say there's an item on the agenda and I'd like to be a delegation, and that's added at this time. Is there anyone here who is attending and would like to be a delegation this evening? Thank you. All those in favor of the agenda? That's carried. Thank you very much. The conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest around the table? Seeing none, we now move to the reports. There is, of course, the one report. Staff will be making a presentation to council. I understand display boards related to this item will be available for public review, and I believe they're there and there. I will ask that staff begin the presentation. I will ask that anyone present, particular council, would you please ensure your cell phone does not ring, that you are In fact, it would be preferred for council to turn it off, but if, for those of you in the audience, if you could turn the ringer off, that would be appreciated. I do have a motion before me. It is moved by myself. It is seconded by Councillor Miles. It is as printed in the agenda. Following the staff presentation, we will begin to receive the delegations. Following the delegations, we will, council will then debate the motion that is now before the chair. Then we will have question period, the confirming bylaw, and then adjournment. Everyone clear on how this works? Thank you very much. So beginning the presentation, I would like to welcome Julian Pattison, who is the Commissioner of Buildings and Property Management, to take us through the presentation relating to the matter before us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and members of Council, and good evening and welcome to the members of the public who have come to participate in tonight's proceedings. Staff has prepared a brief presentation of approximately 30 to 40 minutes to accompany the more detailed report that you have in front of you. While there will only be 3 staff members presenting tonight, we have many other staff members who are here tonight who have contributed fully to both the RFP process and the evaluation process, including members of the Evaluation Steering Committee, members of the 3 evaluation sub-teams, several subject matter experts from across multiple disciplines and multiple departments. And we also have some of our external consultants here this evening, including representatives from the firms Bennett Jones and Deloitte Touche. On behalf of all staff and advisors, I want to say how excited we are about the Southwest Quadrant Renewal Plan and the opportunity to help advance this tremendously important initiative for the City of Brampton. Council has entrusted staff with an enormous responsibility, and we have done our best to address Council's goals and objectives related to this initiative. The presentation this evening roughly follows the outline of the report. The report, as you know, has 2 components. Firstly, the final evaluation document and recommendations of the Evaluation Steering Committee. And secondly, the staff report on corporate implications. I will talk a bit about the background of this project, the RFP process, and evaluation of final offers. Commissioner John Corbett, the Commissioner of Planning, Design and Development, will then present an overview of the 2 solutions that were submitted, highlighting the urban design, functional, and technical elements of each solution. Then Commissioner Mo Lewis, the Commissioner of Financial and Information Services, will then speak to the financial evaluation and corporate implications. The matter before you tonight is a procurement matter, which we hope will lead to a council decision regarding RFP 2009-072, Southwest Quadrant Renewal Plan, to either approve staff's recommendations this evening or to cancel the RFP. So this is essentially a green light, red light decision this evening. In 2005, the city issued a request for expressions of interest. This first broad offering to the marketplace was intended to do 2 things. First, to see who was interested and who had the financial and technical wherewithal to carry out a City Hall expansion. And secondly, to look at some concepts for City Hall expansion. The procurement process did not advance to the RFP stage or the negotiation stages because a number of factors had changed, including the scope and scale of the development, such as higher anticipated construction values, requests for more administration space, and more desired amenities. Council also expressed a desire for a signature building, where the request for expression of interest called for a functional building solution. Also, there was an increased focus on downtown revitalization, Not only did the scope need to be expanded, but the initiative needed to be rebranded. And finally, there was a need for flexibility in the construction delivery approach. The original offering provided for one solution only. That was a city finance solution delivered by a design-build consortium. The next major milestone in the RFP process was a December 10th, 2008 Head of Council report, which provided a fresh go-forward blueprint on how to address the city's long-term administrative space requirements. It set out the guiding principles for a long-term solution, provided updates on a number of work packages that staff were working on, due diligence work packages, and started to introduce other concepts into the discussion, such as debt, financing, and government advocacy. On June 24th, 2009, Council agreed on a detailed set of resolutions, which are contained in the report, including the requirement for staff to issue an RFP, the need to look for unique and creative ways to deliver administrative space and downtown revitalization, a focus on maximizing private sector investment, elimination of a city-led or sole-financed build-to-own solution. And recognition of the city's desire for nominal or no additional impact to property taxes. This was followed by the issuance of the RFP in accordance with these resolutions on October 30th, 2009. Council approved 7 guiding principles for the Southwest Quadrant Renewal Plan. 6 of those were approved in the December 2008 report, and 1 at a later date by Council. All 7 of the guiding principles were included in the RFP. The guiding principles are set out here and in no particular order. They were given no particular order or matter of importance. But the first one was to increase office adjacencies and reduce fragmentation of departments. As you know, the city owns and leases a number of properties in the downtown currently. We are using 5 facilities in the downtown for administrative space, including 2 leased facilities. We are also using a number of satellite facilities, including Civic Center and Flower City Community Campus. The second guiding principle was to anticipate and accommodate future growth of the administration. We discussed this matter in great detail in the April 2009 workshop. And you recall we talked about how in a typical year, as the city is growing, we need about 15,000 square feet of new administrative space a year. However, because of budget considerations, we know that not all years are typical. We mentioned at the time that we feel that we have a good idea of our end state staffing and space numbers. However, it's much more difficult to anticipate what the increments of our new space requirements are between now and build out. The next principle was to control space costs and ensure value for money to taxpayers. Obviously, it's easier to control your costs when you have large contiguous blocks of space. The large floor plates allow for less day-to-day churn associated with new staff, moves, and corporate realignments. The next guiding principle was, and Council expressed this desire throughout our discussions, to centralize civic employees in historic downtown. We recognize that this building, that the existing City Hall, is the administrative hub as well as the iconic and symbolic home of municipal government in Brampton. A physical addition to City Hall will reinforce this principle. The next guiding principle is to contribute to the revitalization of downtown Brampton. You will hear more on this from Commissioner Corbett and Commissioner Lewis, including details of the multiplier effects associated with the development of this magnitude. The principle also allowed us to consider other potential uses that might contribute to downtown revitalization. Ensure that Brampton is recognized as an employer of choice. So first and foremost, it's important that we provide a clean, safe, comfortable physical environment for staff to work in. We should also try to achieve reasonable space density numbers in terms of square foot per person. And the city wants to signal to the marketplace that we are an employer of choice by building a signature Class A building. And lastly, ensure an appropriate balance between public and private sector risk. We believe that the proposal before you today meets this principle, recommending a long-term partnership that transfers risk elements to the private sector. The report talks in quite a bit of detail about guiding principles and objectives, but what are the hard deliverables of the RFP? Well, we see three hard deliverables. The first one is to select a long-term development partner, a preferred respondent. The Evaluation Steering Committee is recommending Dominus as a preferred respondent for this role. The second hard deliverable was to find a viable solution to meet the city's requirements, a technical solution and an occupancy model. The Dominus solution, using 4 city-owned sites, a 3-phase development, a lease-to-own occupancy model, and a construction management delivery model, provides that viable solution. The third deliverable is to ensure the solution represents good value for money, construction and occupancy costs. Construction costs have been validated. Return on investment fundamentals have been tested and validated. Return on equity requirements and internal rate of return requirements are aligned with marketplace indicators. The Dominus solution represents good value for money. I'd like to talk a little bit about the RFP process. The competitive dialogue process was utilized for the RFP. This is a leading-edge procurement approach which is new to Canada but used widely in Europe and the UK. In my role as past chair of the National Executive Forum on Public Property, I am aware that many public agencies across Canada are extremely interested in using competitive dialogue and watching closely to see how Brampton succeeds with this approach. This is a procurement approach that many other government agencies want to use. The city needed an RFP process that will allow us to establish our technical, legal, and financial requirements and work with the private sector to customize a solution for Brampton. The more traditional approaches, such as design build, design bid build, design competition, were not suited to meet council's objectives. Competitive dialogue allowed us to view alternative solutions, to offer incentives to the private sector through the community investment plan, and to look at opportunities for things like enterprise zoning, to harvest the creativity of the private sector using different business models, different occupancy models, and different construction delivery models. Essentially, it allowed for many, many more options. In terms of governance and reporting structure for the procurement process, as mentioned earlier, the process was led by an evaluation steering committee of senior staff, including 4 members of senior management team and 2 directors. The steering committee was supported by 3 sub-teams, a procurement process team, a technical evaluation team, and a financial evaluation team, as well as several subject matter experts representing a number of disciplines across city departments. External expertise was provided by Professor James McKellar as the independent process and fairness advisor reporting to council. Professor McKellar provided oversight to ensure fairness, equity, objectivity, and completeness. Professor McKellar's final report is provided as an appendix to the council report. External expertise was also provided by Deloitte & Touche as our competitive dialogue and financial consultant, advising on the procurement process and the value for money analysis, and also legal advice, external legal advice from Bennett Jones. Three firms were invited to the competitive dialogue stage. 2 submissions qualified and advanced to competitive dialogue. 2 final offers were received on December 9th. Both selected respondents provided detailed proposals based on a significant amount of work by the respondent teams. The evaluation process then took a number of weeks, resulting in recommendations before you this evening. Like all other procurements that the city manages, an evaluation framework was developed for comparative scoring. And as the city does with all other RFPs, fairness and objectivity was maintained through the evaluation process by segregation of duties and independent analysis by the various teams. The sub-teams reported their findings and their scoring to the Evaluation Steering Committee, and the steering committee decided on the preferred respondent and is making the recommendations to council. Each of the final offers calls for a long-term vision for the southwest quadrant, and that's the area within a 5-minute walking radius of the existing city hall. Identification of sites, buildings, and amenities that would contribute to the vision. Options for parking, including above ground and below ground parking, were required. A preferred occupancy model from the many, many options available was required. And just to give an example of some of the options, just on the lease side, things like a straight operating lease, lease to own or a capital lease, lease with periodic capital payments or balloon payments, lease with capital reversion, payment at the end, operating lease with stabilized payments, operating lease with step-up provisions, and many, many others. We asked respondents to identify the one that would work for us, the one that would work for them, without altering their tried and true business models. As indicated in the report, both final offers met the completeness test and advanced to the final evaluation stage. At this time, this concludes the presentation on the introduction and background. I'd like to ask Commissioner John Corbett to provide an overview of the 2 solutions submitted, highlighting the technical elements of each.
Thank you, Commissioner Patterson, and good evening. I'm pleased to be part of this presentation tonight to provide you with the overview of the 2 solutions as indicated by Commissioner Patterson. What I will attempt to do is to provide the details on the urban design, the functional and technical elements of each solution, and the evaluation scores that were derived by the evaluation team. I will first talk about the dominant solution, the recommended solution before you tonight. This is a very exciting project that entails 4 discrete sites within 5-minute walking distance as prescribed by the RFP, as was just described by Commissioner Patterson. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the 4 sites that are implicated in the proposal. In terms of phase 1 is the existing property at George Street across from City Hall, city-owned lands. Phase 1A is a piece of land just north of City Hall out to 33 Queen, providing Queen Street access and exposure to the project. Phase 2 goes further north on John Street and utilizes a vacant piece of land just outside the City Hall, the city operated parking garage. And then finally, phase 3, further to the east along Queen Street, is involving the library site that now exists on that property. So now I'll talk about each one of those phases in a little bit more detail. Phase 1 is a 9-story building proposed at 41 John Street with a second-story link to Phase 1A. So physically a walkway connection across at the second-story level into the next phase, 1A, which will start construction almost immediately after the first phase is initiated. This will also involve 5 levels of parking, including over 446 spaces. It will also entail administrative office space of approximately 126,400 square feet, which is in line with the RFP requirements. Meeting and committee rooms will also be provided at approximately 1,000 square feet. A police station and ground floor retail is also envisaged part of this phase at approximately 1,500 and 10,000 square feet, respectively. It is intended that the ground floor retail space would be turned over to the proponent upon its completion. Phase 1A, again, is the 3-story addition to the existing City Hall, and its components, major functional components, include meeting and committee rooms of another approximately 1,000 square feet, additional retail space at 6,187 feet, and a landscape courtyard adjacent to Queen Street, providing for an iconic landscaped destination and point of entry into the new site. Phase 2 then goes further north, 20 George Street, with a 10-story building that will replace the existing parking garage. It is also proposed that this site, a major component of the functionality of the site, would be a library at approximately 130,000 square feet, and additional retail of 4,000 square feet, and 360 underground parking spaces. Phase 3 would entail the replacement of the existing central library at 65 Queen Street with an 8-story mixed-use building. It would also be the second phase of city administration phase of 120,000 square feet, again fulfilling the RFP requirements. This site also harnesses the potential to provide for some urban renewal in terms of residential and commercial and mixed-use development. In terms of our support for the Dominus solution, this slide indicates that the vision that's forecast and projected through the final offer submission provides for significant public facilities to be phased in all quadrants, all 4 quadrants of the downtown. Rather than just focusing on the southwest, obviously you've seen from the slides tonight that it does involve 4 quadrants and will provide exceptional revitalization potential for the downtown, and will also contribute to the city's HACE objectives and overall 24-hour activity in our downtown, which is an essential part of any successful downtown rehabilitation project. Overall, the project includes elements that will add to the central area as the heart of the city, and as I said, acting as a very, very strong catalyst for future redevelopment in the downtown. Some of the signature elements of Phase 1 include a U-shaped necklace, as is termed in the proposal, forming an architectural concept linking the new buildings around the existing City Hall. There will be a grand new north entrance into the City Hall from Queen Street and a landscape forecourt at the existing 33 Queen Street location. There will be an expansive 3-story glass podium with views into very animated retail space at the ground floor level, and there will be indoor and outdoor spaces suitable for public events and installations. This slide shows the basics of the proposal, and as indicated, the existing City Hall is located just behind the forecourt, in this location. Obviously, you can see the clock tower. And this is the new structure to the north on 33 Queen with the forecourt indicated here. Obviously, the major office component is located on the west side of George Street with the meeting spaces and ground floor retail. This is an example or a rendering of the concept for the forecourt along Queen Street as a major entrance into the new facility. And again, a streetscape level showing the type of dynamic activity that can happen on the corner of Queen and George Streets, including the glass-covered connection into the existing City Hall. Turning to the Moorgard solution, in contrast, it involves only one site, of course, that being Again, the city-owned site, 41 George Street. It is proposing a 10-story building with an administration space of 126,000 square feet to meet the RFP requirements, a library of 45,000 square feet in comparison to the 130,000 square feet in the Dominus proposal, a police station of 3,315 square feet, and ground floor retail of approximately 10,000 square feet. Two options for parking are provided within the proposal, one being 2 levels of parking, one at grade and one below, for a total of 133 spaces, or a second, more expansive option, including 6 levels of parking, 4 above ground, 2 below, for a total of 432 spaces. In terms of our overall findings for the Moorgard solution, we find that it does provide an architectural corner treatment at the corner of George and Queen Street. It does provide a 15-meter high podium with a planted terrace, providing some architectural definition for the downtown. It does remove gaps in street level facades along Queen and George Street, obviously replacing or building on the existing vacant street frontages in that location. There are extensive glass treatments and angular surface, an option for a second-story bridge connection to City Hall, again as an optional use, and it also includes some active uses at the street level. The proposal for Moorgard was found by the evaluation team to provide a relatively conventional architectural approach, lacking a little bit in context to the balance of downtown Brampton, especially with respect to its heritage character. In addition, the proposal does require the acquisition of additional property beyond city-owned lands that are currently available, and that does present its challenges and complexities to the completion of the project. Little is added to the central area as the heart of the city, or as to act as a catalyst for future development, in that it basically focuses its attention just on one site. Here are the conceptual diagrams accompanying the Moorgard proposal, and this is a view looking southwest at George and Queen. You can notice the podium and the angular glass tower above it. This is an illustration looking north on Queen. You can see the distinctive architectural corner treatment forming the major entrance into the proposed building, and the glass tower. This slide is a consolidation of all the square footages that I mentioned in the presentation relative to the administrative space and the community uses. I won't go through them again in detail. However, I'd point out for council and the public's benefit that the library and police station requirements were derived based on requirements of those two agencies directly. In terms of our evaluation scores, this is a roll-up of the very detailed evaluation that was undertaken. You can see that a score of over 404 out of a possible total of 500 was assigned to the Dominus proposal, and 262 points over the maximum 500 assigned to the Moorgard proposal. So I'll now turn it over to Commissioner Lewis to review the financial aspects of the proposal.
Good evening. Just at the outset, I'd like to say a couple of things just to put things in context. When we're looking at the financial evaluation, we have to recognize the fact that we're only looking to cost out, or we've only costed out phase one. And the reason being is that although at the outset, when we first received the submissions from the respondents, one of the due diligence tests was to make sure that each respondent had the capacity financially and technically to carry out the entire vision. However, in the RFP document itself, what we defined, the city defined requirements were that we had specified the time in which we would be ready to occupy the phase one space. However, for phase two and phase three, we did not specify a time in which the city would be prepared to occupy. So on that basis, the respondents provided the detailed costing with respect to phase one. So when we did our financial evaluation, we're dealing with phase one of the project. And as Commissioners Pattison and Corbett had mentioned, is that when we had looked at these projects, because we wanted to harness the creativity of the private sector, there are a number of things that were different from proposals in terms of multiple solutions, talking about giving us options with respect to obviously building space and parking. We had a variety of terms and conditions. We had different leasing models, as Commissioner Pattison mentioned, as well as we had prices quoted in terms of occupancy costs, or we had some prices quoted in terms of building costs per square feet, excuse me. So one of the things that we wanted to do is just draw your attention that as part of the evaluation, then staff did do a considerable amount of due diligence to do our best to get an apples-to-apples comparison, and that entailed looking at the various calculations, pricing, both construction and operating costs and occupancy costs, as well as making sure that we had clarity. So we would request clarity and confirmation to make sure we interpreted things properly from the respondents, as well as where we could, we would, where appropriate, we would seek industry benchmarks, as well as use the resources of external consultants that we had before us. So when we look at the key elements of the financial evaluation, number one is the occupancy cost per square foot. And that is number one because in the RFP, Council and the city were very deliberate in that the commitment that the city was looking to make was it was going to be willing to pay an occupancy cost to occupy space beginning in 2014. So that is where a considerable amount of work was done. Then we also have a category for quality of the proposed financing plan. We have a category for property tax revenue generated, and as well as the economic impact. So when we look at the quick summary description of the Dominus solution, the annual occupancy cost, again, this was the primary requirement of the RFP, was that it was identified as $8.2 million per year for phase one, which included sites 1A and 1A. Also, in their description of their solution, they had identified a term of 25 years, and at which point in time the ownership would be transferred to the city. And then what we also identified was that the retail space, however, would remain with the respondent. In this particular solution, all development in phase one will occur on city-owned property, and as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, very explicitly that the pricing and evaluation was done on phase one. Under the Morguard solution, again leading to the fact in terms of the challenges in terms of evaluating the responses and trying to get apple-to-apple comparison, what they did was provide some options with respect to parking, and so that's reflected here. What we did in our evaluation, trying to compare apples to apples, we looked at it and we compared their option 2, which was 432 parking space, because that was the closest to the city requirement of 426. Apologize for that. And then the other thing that we've done here is we just noted that they did specify Morguard, again, a 25-year term. However, instead of the fixed rate, which was specified by Dominus of the $8.2 million across all 25 years, this lease required some escalation prices, one based on specific rates at years 6 and 11, and then two other ones at years 6, 16, and 21, again, and that would be left to the market rates applicable at that time. The other difference is that the city ownership did not just get transferred at the end of the lease. There was a price to be negotiated at the end of the lease between the city and Morguard for the city if it wanted to take ownership of the facility. And the development, as proposed in phase one, under the Morguard proposal requires the acquisition of privately owned property, and that would entail council to make a decision in terms of how that land could be acquired. So that is a summary of the Morguard proposal. Other factors, the second factor that we had looked at was the quality of the proposed financing plan. As I said at the outset, we did work as staff initially, and we are very confident that both respondents had the capacity and the financial capacity to carry out the plan as they had put forward. Just to give you an example of some of the information that we required, was the idea that we had asked them about the proposed financing structure, including an identification of investors and lenders, description of security provided. So with confidence, we could say that the respondents had the capacity to carry out the plan as they envisioned. Another category that when we were looking at the responses was that council made it abundantly clear we wanted to revitalize and what the impact would be because of this development. So what we've done is we've summarized here the impacts that we would see in terms of direct impact as well as indirect impact of, again, phase one of the proposal. And then as well, we took the opportunity to utilize the models as well to present some employment in terms of job that would be created in terms of the investment in this work. And so the message I want to leave with members of council and the public is that the impact of these two proposals, phase one, are very similar, and that this work, just to make sure that we had put our best foot forward, it was actually work done by city staff and in conjunction with Deloitte, our independent consultant, that made sure that the numbers were validated. In terms of the evaluation scores then, is that, as I mentioned, the most important component was the occupancy cost per square foot, and so that received the most weighting under the scoring matrix, and you can see the scores that were assigned. The other thing I would want to just draw your attention to is that under the property tax impact, because of the fact that the large portion of the property or space that was being constructed would be occupied by the city, then what we had was the city would not be paying property taxes. So in terms of the property tax impact, it was largely centered around the retail space created under the plan. So in the Dominus plan, the retail space of 10,000 square feet was all going to be in addition to existing retail space. However, in the Morguard solution, because of their manner in which their building envelope was situated, it would mean the elimination of some already existing retail space, so it was a much smaller incremental impact on the property tax. So let me just step back from it, I apologize. So when we look at it in terms of the total financial evaluation scores, out of 500, you can see that Dominus scored 480, and the Morguard proposal was 327. So now when we combine those with the technical scores that were mentioned by Commissioner Corbett, you can see that overall Dominus proposal was assigned 884, and the Morguard proposal was assigned 589 points out of 1,000. So on that basis, and what's contained in the staff report is that the Evaluation Steering Committee recommends that Dominus be selected as the long-term development partner for the city. What we've done here on this slide is just I'll make a couple of notes, and one is the strategic partnership of Fernbrook Citizen Dominance Group and Zeidler Partnership Architects form the strategic partnership that we would be partnering with to deliver the long-term solution for the Southwest Quadrant. And then what we did as well is just to assist in terms of the group that we would be dealing with, that we provided 3 examples of projects that they're working on within the GTA. So as you recall, in the staff report, it was split into 2 parts. The first part was the report by the Evaluation Steering Committee. It was signed by all members of the Evaluation Steering Committee, and the recommendation coming forward from that would be that we would select Dominus as the preferred respondent. What I'm about to do now is go through the second part of the staff report, and that is the corporate implications. And so what I want to do is just take the opportunity to recognize that although the city's commitment we would not start paying to occupy the property until 2014, what we wanted to do is just look at it in the context of putting things in perspective. And I say that because the lease to own proposal, we would be committing ourselves to an annual occupancy cost of $8.2 million starting in 2014. Now, Commissioner Pattison mentioned that, talking about the idea of transfer of risk to the private sector. Well, I say that in the context of the $94.3 million that is the construction value of the Phase 1. That is something that, as things proceed, and if there were conditions changing or whatever, you're looking at that figure is just an estimate. We would be in a position where we would be committed to or committing to a figure of $8.2 million. And that's our annual occupancy commitment. And then what we wanted to do is just put it in the context of how does that relate to information we previously provided to council. Is that capital cost, how does it fare based on industry standards or what we know? And so what we're trying to show you here is that when we did an estimate of a similar facility, we came up with a figure of just short of $98 million. So what we're trying to say is that the costs appear reasonable. And then when we look at it in terms of the annual occupancy cost, well, there is a difference. And there is a difference between $8.2 and $6.6 million based on what we would be doing if we build it to own ourselves. And what we've tried to do then is explain in the report that there's reasons for it, and that is there's a higher cost of capital. The city of Brampton is very fortunate, AAA credit rating, so its finance costs, it can borrow money at the lowest rate possible. As well as under the private sector proposal, there is profit margin and there's that risk transfer premium that I was talking about. And then the other thing we wanted to do is, again, just to give council the comfort that we did have, again, we've used benchmarks. We had it independently validated by Deloitte Consulting that the occupancy cost review did represent good value for money for the city. So the occupancy cost that, again, has been the focus and the primary reason for the RFP, Dominus Solution calls for $8.2 million per year. As we mentioned again in the report, that there's a funding gap in terms of what we're currently paying versus what we would be paying under that scenario. We are also cognizant of the fact that council in their resolution on June 24, 2009 identified that their desire to have nominal or no impact on the property taxpayer. So we as staff understand that council wants to show their commitment to the Brampton taxpayers. However, they have to balance that with their desire to continue with the revitalization of downtown Brampton. And so staff is committing, even though we don't have to make our initial payment until 2014, that starting in the 2012 budget process, which starts in 2011, staff would be coming forth with options to council to make choices in terms of how do we finance that plan. And the intent would be, again, to manage or phase in the additional incremental cost of the new occupancy costs. The other thing that we wanted to do is assist in, in terms of the investment that the city would be making in downtown Brampton. So for illustration purposes, what we have on this slide is that phases 1 and 1A, as we say in the staff report, totaled $94 million. Then what we wanted to do is to display the fact that if in today's dollar we were to construct all 3 phases today, we've estimated that the cost for phase 2 would be $86 million. The cost for phase 3 would be in the order of $71 million, to give us a total of $251 million if all 3 phases were constructed today. And what we did that for was to put it in context, then combined with Alderley and the Rose Theatre, how much the city-initiated investment would be in downtown Brampton. Okay, and then we then took it one step further and said, if we were to do that, then what would that do to achieve the objective of being a catalyst for further private development in downtown Brampton? And in conjunction with the economic development team, they provided some information about a 1.4 times industry multiplier, and made it abundantly clear to me that the amount and the timing of this impact would be dependent on market conditions and other opportunities, because we are in the GTA. But there would be, that effect would be expected if we were to make this type of investment in downtown Brampton. I believe that Commissioner Pattison did make some comment to this already, but I just wanted to reiterate the fact that in the report in the summer we say that the benefits to the city, we've both, Commissioner Pattison and I, have spoken to the first point in terms of transfer risk to the private sector. I've mentioned on several occasions that the city would not have to make an occupancy payment until 2014. Yes, we're doing this to satisfy the administrative space requirements. Yes, we're doing it to act as a catalyst for downtown revitalization, excuse me. And then after this, the way the payments are constructed, we would be transferred ownership at the end of the lease under the Dominus proposal. What's in it for Dominus? The benefits of the respondents? Well, they would assist the city and be a partner in city building. They would be receiving a safe rate of return because they're partnering with a AAA credit rating public sector tenant, being the city of Brampton. So in conclusion, as Commissioner Pattison said at the beginning of the presentation, staff feel this is an exciting opportunity for downtown Brampton. We believe this would be a strategic investment. However, it must be considered in the context of other council priorities, and that staff, if we have a positive response to our recommendation today, then as part of the 2012 budget process, which we know will be beginning in 2011, we will provide options in terms of how we phase in the impact of the incremental costs. So that concludes the staff presentation.
Well, thank you very much for taking us through the very complex studies that have been underway and explaining them very clearly for all of us here. We are now going to move to the portion of the agenda to allow our delegations to speak. And I would like to ask the clerk to please make a comment as it relates to delegations to an RFP. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, under Council's Procedure Bylaw 160-2004 as amended, delegations are permitted at a council meeting on business items that are part of the meeting agenda. Item C1 on this evening's special council agenda relates to RFP 2009-072, in which City Council is the decision maker and the decision has not yet been made. The public is therefore advised that as a condition of the RFP, respondents are not permitted to communicate with council. Therefore, City Council will not hear from any of the respondents who made a submission in response to the RFP or any representative, agent, or anyone else on their behalf. And council will not hear any representations as to the contents of any submissions at this time. Delegations are reminded that there is a 5-minute time limit for each delegation unless council authorizes an extension. Council may ask questions of a delegation for clarification purposes only without debate. Before the meeting adjourns this evening, there will be a 15-minute public question period where the public are invited to ask questions of council related to any item on the agenda for this evening's meeting. Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the delegations to come down as your name is called, and I'll read a few names at a time so you know where you are in the queue. Our first delegation this evening, I'd like to welcome Mr. Stephen Rhodes, President of the Brampton Board of Trade, followed by Mr. Christopher Bejnar, and followed by Mr. Douglas Bryden, just to give you a sense of where you are. Mr. Rhodes, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Stephen Rhodes, and I am the president of the Brampton Board of Trade. Thank you for the opportunity to present our views on what arguably will be the biggest development project in the history of downtown Brampton. First, I'd like to remind you that the Board of Trade was a strong proponent of leveraging the city's future administrative space needs to provide a catalyst for further downtown revitalization. We strongly believe that City Hall expansion can be a stimulus for further private sector development in the downtown core. While the Board of Trade and others have raised concerns about the RFP process, we are mindful of the fact that Council approved it. However, I think it's fair to say that the fact that this process has not been used in Canada before has obviously led to some confusion. But at this point, we have two choices. We either accept the recommendations as presented by staff and move on, or turn it down and risk that nothing will be done in downtown for years, if ever. The recommendations here address many of the Brampton Board of Trade's concerns when we first appeared before Council in 2009. It has long been our position, and formally encapsulated in our policy resolution of June 2009, that City Hall expansion must occur in downtown Brampton. At the time, we encouraged City Council to immediately engage in an RFP process that would take advantage of the creativity and the expertise in the private sector, and moreover, that expansion result in a reasonable and adequate facility to meet the needs of the city going forward. Further, we said, quote, "The board strongly recommends that the city ensure the expansion of City Hall is cost-effective and in line with best practices, and that the city endeavor to minimize the impact of the tax burden on Bramptonians as a result of this expansion." Your evaluation steering committee recommends Dominus Construction Group be selected as a preferred respondent. And based on the criteria you've established and a rather laborious 51-page report and our own policy resolution, we have no quarrel with the report's findings or with your choice of a preferred vendor. The project as proposed by Dominus is exciting and will no doubt provide our city with facilities that will anchor a vibrant and thriving downtown. We are, however, concerned about the $200 million price tag, albeit over 25 years. If this recommendation is approved, we encourage city staff in its negotiations to consider the necessary options to ensure a minimum impact on taxpayers, perhaps even leveraging our own AAA credit rating in the form of a guarantee that might reduce some costs. As well, we ask Council to find savings elsewhere to offset these costs. We understand that the city's existing lease space, when renewed, will not be perhaps at the significantly discounted rates that we currently enjoy. And while that might mitigate the annual lease rate proposed here, it doesn't absolve staff or ultimately Council from finding ways to minimize the impact. As the financing of this project will be subject to consideration during the budget deliberations of 2012, We would ask that the Board of Trade and other stakeholders have an opportunity to be involved to the extent possible to ensure that this high-priority item can be financed. We're also very interested in learning more about Phase 2 and 3, which is part of the successful proponent's long-term plan. In particular, Phase 2 includes a new downtown library branch at a cost of $86 million. In principle, we support a new downtown library, but we need to know more about this and Phase 3 and how it will be financed. In closing, we support these recommendations because we believe it's time to get moving on downtown revitalization. We commend staff on executing the direction of Council regarding this process, and we hope that Council will support their recommendation to ensure that the development in the heart of our city is not unduly delayed. And of course, we look forward to those discussions around how we are going to pay for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Christopher Besnar is next, and then Mr. Douglas Bryden, and then Mr. Don Naylor, so you know.
I'm about 7 to 8 minutes, if that's okay with everybody, maybe like a 2 or 3 minute extension to the 5 minutes.
Could I have a motion, please, to allow 7 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you.
7 minutes it is.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Boehner, and I'm a proud 8-year resident of Brampton, spending lots of my personal time and effort on Brampton downtown revitalization issues. I'd like to begin by asking some of the key city staff members who have been involved with preparing this report a simple yes or no question. Mr. Bonovsky, do you live in Brampton?
No, I do not.
Mr. Lewis, do you live in Brampton? Mr. Corbett, do you live in Brampton? No. And finally, Mr. Patterson, do you live in Brampton? Thank you, everyone. Where to begin? For starters, let's review this competitive... Well, I hope you guys live in Brampton. Where to begin? For starters, let's review this competitive dialogue process that we just had to endure for almost 1.5 years. Oh, sorry. Where to begin? For starters, let's review this competitive dialogue process that we just had to endure for almost 1.5 years. I hope that my eyesight is still 20/20 because I thought this process was about revitalizing the southwest quadrant of the city, an area bounded by Queen to the north, Main Street to the east, and George Street to the west, and the existing City Hall to the south. I don't believe that the priority was to redevelop just a very tiny fraction of the southwest quadrant, adjacent to the southwest quadrant, north of the southwest quadrant, and finally east of the southwest quadrant. We might as well rename this RFP and call it the entire, or all around the downtown revitalization project. The city manager and mayor selected this new process in the midst of, the city manager and mayor selected or recommended this new process in the midst of one of the worst economic downturns we've seen in a generation. One would have thought that we would have seen a lineup of developers willing to submit a proposal for this high-profile project, yet we managed only to get one new interested company to throw in their hat into the ring. Was this process too new with too many questions that it actually deterred many proposals? A process that was so new that you felt it necessary to hire an outside consultant to act as a process and fairness advisor and pay him $70,000 of taxpayers' money for his services. I believe that Professor McKellar himself is in conflict of interest as the fairness and process advisor. He was the one to recommend this process to the mayor and the city manager. He was hired without contract, tendering to act as a consultant, and he is the one who weighs in on how fair the process was and how fair and ethical all business was conducted. He recommended this process and got handsomely rewarded for his advice. Why wouldn't we have hired an independent consultant to oversee this process? Only then, I believe, it would be fair. Getting back on topic, let's talk more about this competitive dialogue process. Could we not have, at the very least, tried this new process out on a community center or a fire hall to test things out a bit, getting our feet wet, before diving headfirst into what is probably the most expensive and highest profile project Brampton has ever seen? Timing of this RFP has also been quite an issue. How many delays have there been? 3, 4, or 5? Wasn't this process to be concluded last summer? When I corresponded with the mayor back in the summer, in August 2010, hoping to see a completed staff report so that we as citizens could engage in discussions about the proposal before the October 25th election, the answer I got back was, sure. I was actually hopeful that we would have something to discuss or debate with all the mayoralty candidates as to what the vision for downtown revitalization might be. Unfortunately, Mr. Bonovsky broke the bad news on September 20th 2010, that the process required more time and would be now delayed until January 2011. It wasn't the city who was delaying the process, it was the final two bidders who had requested an additional 3 months so they could prepare their final reports. I guess that ended any chance for debate on this proposal before the election, didn't it? Openness and transparency of this process has also been another hotbed of controversy, hasn't it? Forget the fact that there was absolutely zero public involvement. Our councillors were also having a hard time with this process. While even Councillor Paleschi last year was quoting The Guardian as saying, "It was the most secretive RFP I've ever been involved with as a councillor." He was also quite upset at the fact that he and any other members of the public would not be able to see any concept drawings from the 3 proposals. He was quoted as saying, "I want to see all the 3 design concepts, that's all. And I don't have a problem with the public seeing them either." In my sales profession, I work on RFPs all the time, and confidentiality is important throughout the process. I have no issues with this. But please tell me why it would be necessary for all 3 bidders, after the process has begun, to be asked to sign an NDA, essentially a gag order that would prevent them from ever revealing or speaking about what they had proposed. Is this some kind of secret military base we're building? The fact that the councillors and residents can never see why one proposal was better over the other is truly unfortunate. Isn't this City Hall a building that belongs to the people? Madam Mayor and councillors, I believe that we have the right to see all the 3 proposals and their financial numbers before any vote takes place tonight. What if we were to see a proposal come out after the vote that could have been delivered on so much more, yet cost the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars less? Would that be acceptable? What I would say is that our council and mayor did not do their homework, and I would expect them to be accountable for holding a developer's interest higher than the interest of the Brampton taxpayer. We talk of an open, transparent, and accountable government. It's time we put those words into action tonight. In fact, one of these 3 bidders tried to ask this very question of openness and transparency of council and was disqualified due to a breach of Ontario procurement law, even though the proposal might have been considered a favorite. After all, Mr. Catruzzola from Inzola, a respected Brampton developer, having built the existing City Hall, the Belvedere and Park Place condominiums, and having restored such heritage jewels like the Old Dominion Building, the Peel Heritage Complex, stood before this very council back in May of 2009, before this RFP was even issued, disclosing financial numbers and project ideas on what it would cost the city to complete such a project. I believe that he was quoted in The Guardian at that time saying it would be costing around $85 million to deliver on all of the city's 250,000 square feet of office space, a new 60,000 square foot library, meeting and retail space, and an additional 800 underground parking spots, and all at the same time. I believe that the square foot price to achieve such a landmark quality building was quoted around $325 to $350 per square foot. Such a proposal would have incorporated the existing City Hall and completely revitalized the entire southwest quadrant of the downtown, eliminating much of the less than desirable buildings and empty storefronts along Queen and Main. The design that was proposed was in response to the city's request for information back in 2005. The design incorporated existing hall's design feature of expanding northward. In case anyone hasn't noticed, the north side of City Hall is mainly a 6-story brick wall for a reason. It was designed to simply add on when the time was right. Not utilizing this option would be a colossal mistake, and we'd be left with challenges on how to add development and intensify beside City Hall in the future. So now I've touched on the process and delays in the process and the openness and transparency of the process. Now let's take a look at what we actually have ended up with. Madam Mayor, you were recently quoted in your inaugural council speech last year that it's Brampton's turn for greatness. The Southwest Quadrant redevelopment was supposed to create an iconic and landmark building that would put Brampton on the map and hopefully get the attention of the development community as a place they needed to be looking at for their next investment. Have we achieved this with the Dominus Citizen Fernbrook proposal? I believe that we fall quite short, not addressing the key requirements of the RFP. How does recommending this proposal help the downtown business owners who have had such high hopes riding on the outcome to get much needed customers like library visitors, students, new residents, or hotel guests into our downtown? In the Dominus Citizen Fernbrook proposal, a library will be built only 5 to 10 years from now, and at what cost? Lots of questions with little details. How do we justify spending $94 million for only 126,000 square feet and 440 parking spots of what looks to be kind of an average, dull building? yet leaving the majority of the decaying properties and substandard retail that have been damaging downtown Brampton's reputation intact. Let's, for argument's sake, take out the underground parking spots. I know. Okay, this is a very important meeting tonight, though, and I only have 2 or 3 more pages. Okay. Let's, for argument's sake, take out the underground parking spots out of this equation. $40,000 per underground parking stall works out to about $17.6 million that we take off the $94 million price tag. That leaves us with $76 million for the actual 126,000 square foot building. I'm not an accountant, but that works out to $606 a square foot just for the building, as the land is free and owned by the city. Let's now compare the figure to an average cost from Reed's construction data. Oh, I estimated.
Moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Palacio. All those in favor of more time? There,
Thank you.
granted.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
That's carried.
Let's now compare this figure to the average cost from Reed's construction data information. My research shows that to build a multi-story concrete reinforced frame structure averages around $180 a square foot in the Toronto marketplace. So 126,000 square feet times $180 a square foot equals around $22.6 million. Let's give our winning bidder some profit by bumping up the square foot price to $300 a square foot. That would bring the price tag for this at about $37.8 million. And we have negotiated through this process a price of $76 million for just this building. That's almost a $39 million overpayment. Let's look at the financing costs for the lease-to-own proposal at $8.2 million for each year for 25 years. I was speaking to my accountant about this, and he actually calculated that under this scenario, the city would be paying an interest rate of around 7.3%. As the mayor boasts about our city's AAA credit rating and financial status as a municipality, we could borrow at the Infrastructure Ontario rate of around 4.5%. Does anyone know what that works out to? Well, instead of paying $205 million for a 126,000 square foot building, we could pay probably $160 million for the same thing. That is $1.8 million less per year over 25 years, a further savings of $45 million. So in total, we might be overpaying Dominus by approximately $84 million. As mayor and councillors of the city, you have an obligation to represent the citizen and taxpayers. How can you possibly support such a lucrative agreement that would sign over to Dominus Citizen Fernbrook? Ms. Dubanovsky, you had mentioned to me in a conversation recently that the main reason for choosing the CDP process was to get a better proposal at a lower cost. With an average building and a higher cost of around $84 million, I just don't see that being achieved with this recommended proposal. What is even more troubling is that we don't even have guarantees from Dominus that Phase 2 and Phase 3 will ever get built, or a promise to keep the numbers at today's prices. What will these other phases cost 5, 10, 15 years from today? There's nothing in the proposal about that. Do we have such guarantees from Dominus Citizen Fernbrook, Mr. Lewis? Are we just going to let the members of the evaluation committee, who don't even call Brampton home, and one developer to get a carte blanche to developing our downtown for the next 20 years based on an average proposal and a crude hand-drawn sketch of a library? I was frankly expecting a lot more from Dominus Citizen Fernbrook, who are building leading-edge projects all over the GTA. Have we not learned from our past mistakes? Didn't we already go down this path with Bramley Limited in the 80s, allowing them to create something that we regret today with the countless boring, concrete, and inspired residential buildings that surround the Bramley City Center? Can we get this project done right first? This alone will cause new and exciting projects to come Brampton's way. If we do this right, we could even sell off some of the city-owned sites in the future to help pay for this project. Again, it depends if we do things right today. As part of the report's evaluation criteria and lengthy amount of time it took to prepare, and again, we've been waiting for like a year for this staff report, I find it very surprising that a bidder's length in business, past experiences, and projects and financial standing were not given any scoring points. Quite a common practice in my line of work when we prepare an RFP. Come on, couldn't we have at least given 25 points for this category? After all, we're about to enter into an exclusive partnership that could last 20 to 25 years. Should we have not done some additional due diligence on this? Since it's missing from the staff report, I'd like to take liberty to highlight some of the key points, starting off with Morguard. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Morguard for their huge investment that they've made in the city of Brampton. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent on transforming the Bramley City Center, the 4107 Mall into great shopping destinations. On the Morguard website, it states that Morguard Corporation is a publicly traded real estate company, and through its subsidiaries, Morguard REIT, Revenue Properties Company, and Morguard Residential, a combined portfolio includes 44 million square feet of office, industrial, retail, and residential properties located all across Canada for a value of $9.2 billion in assets and over 1,200 employees. I must say that I'm quite impressed and a worthwhile candidate for the city to look as a partner. So I'm a bit puzzled. Someone please tell me why we have such a poor proposal that lacks so much detail in the staff report. In the evaluation scoring, Morguard gets barely a passing grade and offers very little specifics. For such a distinguished publicly traded company, I find this truly unbelievable. From the report, I get the sense that they really didn't put their best foot forward. It's almost like they submitted something for the sake of submitting it. If I was Morguard's president, I would be livid at my staff for submitting such a poor response to what could be in excess of $250 to $500 million of new business. Now let's look at Dominus. Who is Dominus? Or shall we refer to them as Dominus Citizen Fernbrook? I see that this explanation of ownership has just been recently added into the staff report tonight. I tried to get some information about Dominus, yet all that comes up is a URL line of www.dominus.ca. When you go and click on this, you are immediately taken to Citizen's website with a brief outline of the company. There are no numbers, and you are directed to one of the Fernbrook Homes developments in Oakville. I was a bit confused by this, so I went a bit further and called the Fernbrook sales office last week. I was told that Dominus, Citizen, and Fernbrook are all partners. I then called the Pier 27 sales office in Toronto and was told almost the same thing, that all these companies and partners, yet in the staff recommendation report, this company was only referred to as Dominus. So I would have to believe that there is some direct connection between these companies, as we can see by the red banners draping the Absolute World condo towers just south of us in Mississauga, with the name Fernbrook, Dominus, and Citizen clearly displayed. In fact, Dominus is kind of the new kid on the block, having been only incorporated in 2004, according to the Reconstruction Data website. So we are about to enter into a $205 million project that we will be partners for 20 to 25 years, and they have been in business for barely 7 years? Or are they really just one company, Dominus, Citizen, Fernbrook, and staff was counting on the many years of quality product and experience by the Cortolucci family who started Fernbrook Homes over 30 years ago? Again, this fact was just submitted into today's staff report as of tonight. What does trouble me is the principals of these companies may have been donating funds to some members of council and the mayor, all the while we have an active RFP in the process. I haven't gone through all the financial statements submitted yet, but I have noticed a few names in my investigation already. Funds for campaigns, galas, or charitable events, in my opinion, should not have been asked for or received from anyone who has any interest in this process while we have this RFP still outstanding. Otherwise, I believe there should be a conflict of interest stated here tonight. Or better yet, let's make it the first task of our new Integrity Commissioner to review the mayor's and council members' election financial statements or fundraising activities to ensure there was no influence with how they voted on this important proposal. Did the staff evaluation team ensure that the clauses that deal with influence in this RFP were followed by all respondents that submitted a proposal? Just to summarize, I would like us to consider taking a step back in order to move forward again. I believe that this process has been recommended by the mayor and our city manager has been a huge disappointment, and there should be consequences for the delays and damage that this has caused Brampton's reputation. I believe that residents have the right to see and compare all three proposals that were received for RFP 2009-072. Keeping things secretive is not the way for Brampton to move forward as an open, transparent, and accountable government. The Dominus Citizen Fernbrook proposal falls short on these many points. It doesn't really address the southwest quadrant bordered by Main, Queen, and George, leaving the decaying buildings and substandard retail intact. It does not utilize the City Hall's future expansion design element, adding space to the north face of the building. This will create complexity and problems of how this side of the building gets developed. It leaves an unattractive 6-story brick wall as a dominant feature of our downtown. The competitive dialogue process was flawed with really not too much competition. It was almost like we had a win by default, with Morguard showing very poorly and lacking many details. As well, this process contributed to many delays and most likely detracted many proposals from being submitted. There was absolutely zero public involvement on what is the most public of buildings in this city. How can we let members of the evaluation committee, who don't even call Brampton home, and one company dictate the future of our downtown core for the next 20 to 25 years. There is no immediate plans for a library in Phase 1. We might have to wait another 5 to 10 years for Dominus Citizen Fernbrook to build one. What was provided was a crude hand-drawn sketch with a price tag that will most likely be very out of date when the time comes to build it. The same can be said of Phase 3, a very basic rendering lacking vision, concrete timing, and financial details. And most importantly, I believe the Dominus Citizen Fernbrook proposal is way too expensive. At $606 a square foot, it is more than double the market price today. Yet what we are getting is an average and uninspired building that doesn't address all the needs of the outlined in the RFP. Add in the financing of the project, there's another $45 million of extra costs. How can our mayor and councillors support something like this? As you see, there are many questions still outstanding, and there's lots at stake tonight. Please don't get me wrong. I am all for development and downtown revitalization. You won't find a bigger fan than myself. I was honestly hoping to see something special from Dominus Citizen Fernbrook as the winning bidder. Unfortunately, that is not the case. I say we defer the vote tonight until all the questions are answered, all the three proposals are open to the public and residents and provided an opportunity to offer comment and input. If not, let's take a step backwards and turn this proposal down and start all over. We have the potential to create the best downtown in the 905. We have so much potential here. All we seem to lack, though, is the vision, political will, and cooperation to make it happen. I believe in a downtown that respects its heritage properties like Alderley, the Peel Heritage Complex, the Dominion Building, our many churches and Victorian-era homes, yet creates a modern, vibrant, and exciting commercial and residential city center that we all can be proud of. Thank you very much for your time this evening, and sorry for being so long.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Doug Bryden. Sorry, we were going to go through the delegations first. Did you want to have questions? That was what we agreed to. Could we do that?
Poignantly. Perhaps we could get a copy of the presentation.
Mr. Manager, could you provide us a copy so staff can look at it now? The question I'm going to ask at the end is to clarify the financial, quite honestly, that's some of the question that I had.
But we'll be asking our questions of staff, not of the delegations of the informational comfort. Welcome, Mr. Bryden.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. We've waited a long time for this day. I was really hoping it would be a hallelujah moment, but I must admit that I am deeply disappointed with the results in front of us. I am a relatively new Brampton resident. I've been here 5 years, but I am a passionate downtown urban fabric person. I have spent a career, and I'll give you one or two examples. Project manager of Toronto's Eaton Centre during the pre-development stage. Project director and developer of the Royal Bank Plaza in downtown Toronto, and I think everybody knows the signature headquarters for the bank. I was one of the founders of the PATH system, an underground labyrinth of retail-lined pedestrian walkways connecting a myriad of major office buildings in downtown Toronto and the subway at 5 stations, and providing convenient, direct eating and shopping experience for office workers. As well, I was Executive Vice President of Bramalea, their commercial properties group, developing a number of buildings in that position. And finally, developer of a 3-building, 750,000 square foot complex of office retail in downtown Silver Spring, Maryland, which is within the beltway that surrounds Washington, and which instituted the rebirth of that community with other developer projects. I hope that this brief synopsis will give some measure of credence to my understanding of urban fabric, how a variety of urban uses integrate with each other for the greater good, and how creative visions can lead to exciting and long-lasting benefits for urban areas. However, before proceeding with my reasons for a thumbs down on this project, I want to be upfront with everybody. I did provide some limited consulting advice to one of the RFP proponents who was long ago rejected. And I therefore have to, because of what I heard from the city clerk this morning or today was that perhaps I am disqualified from reporting to everyone here.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the comments I made at the outset of the delegations were that as a condition of this RFP, respondents are not permitted to communicate with council, and council cannot hear from any respondents who made a submission in response to the RFP or any representative agent or anyone else on their behalf. So if you're saying, sir, that you are connected with a respondent,
I'm not here on their behalf. I provided a limited amount of consulting well over a year ago, and I am asking whether that disqualifies me.
Through you, Mr. Clerk, it's, we don't know the nature of Mr. Bryden's work. We're going to have to rely on his word. If it sounds like he's provided advice, if he thinks that he's got a conflict, then I would suggest that he not proceed, because then he would put his client at risk. If he feels, however, that he is in no risk, then he may proceed, but he's really going to have to make that call for himself.
I'm not sure, I'm really not sure what you've said there. I have the credentials.
It's your call, Mr. Bryden. If you feel that you wish to proceed, proceed.
Well, what are the ramifications? I guess I want to hear that everybody feels that I'm not in jeopardy.
Why don't you just determine if you'd like to proceed, and we're here to listen if you choose to.
Well, I think I'll proceed then.
Okay.
As I have said before, and others have publicly agreed, the RFP was so new, so convoluted and complex that developers across the country, well known for their expertise in development opportunity, decided to take a pass, depriving our community of their creativity. Only 3 submitted a proposal, and only 2 survived the unusual process. That is just not good enough response for the future of Brampton's downtown. Although alternative areas were not precluded, I was in this very chamber when the mayor made it abundantly clear that this proposal call was to focus on the southwest quadrant, hence its name, not just anywhere in the downtown. The recommended proposal pays lip service to the southwest quadrant and does not take advantage of harmonization with the existing city hall in a comprehensive way. 3, in fact, we are shown a narrow funnel connector pedestrian walkway from the present City Hall rotunda to Queen Street, dividing the block at its midpoint and preventing the comprehensive redevelopment of this most important section of our downtown and its retail revitalization and animation. Sadly, 4, the library finds a home mid-block, fronting on George Street, thereby once again preventing a comprehensive redevelopment of, in my opinion, the most attractive and significant redevelopment opportunity for multi-land use development anywhere in this country. This facility is simply a standalone, single-purpose library. It could and should have been seen as Brampton's resource center, almost like a university of learning, integrated directly with other downtown uses, conveniently and seamlessly to the advantage of the city administration, employees, and the public. 5, by spreading future expansions at least a 5-minute outside walking distance away, the next City Hall expansion now is without question outside the recognized core. Gone is the importance of improved productivity and efficiency of communication just an elevator ride away in one connected building complex, one of the major reasons for considering consolidation of City Hall in the first place. 6, the suggested cost of the first phase of this project seems very, very high, and the financial arrangements for the city on a lease-to-own basis need much more explanation and understanding to ensure that the city is receiving appropriate value for their lease commitment over time, and so that the city can project the likely tax impact. 7, the initial City Hall expansion across George Street underutilizes this strategic land parcel, does not provide optimal additional parking in an obvious and convenient location with a connection to the existing parking garage to improve its efficiency, and relies upon the new John Street garage to handle additional parking requirements. 8, this project uses city land holdings wherever they are, which they lease.
Excuse me, Mr. Bryden, with the 5-minute limit, you're now at 8. Would you like to go to 10 minutes?
Okay, I thank you very much.
There
If
you
you'd
go.
Give me
Move
another couple.
second, all in favor, good, carry on.
Thank you. This project uses city land holdings wherever they are, which they lease at $2 rather than at a rent based on their market value, with no thought of how these sites relate to one another, thereby compromising the potential that this development will act as a catalyst for future downtown projects. The result is that this project loses impact, has no presence, and does not announce downtown Brampton on its skyscape. Have we let derelict structures of yesteryear and seedy, less than appealing retail tenancies trump enlightened comprehensive planning? And 9, and finally, I have not seen any mention of the impact on cost and design of meeting the floodplain requirements of the Conservation Authority. Therefore, I put forward the following recommendations. It is far too important for the future of downtown Brampton, for the councillors and for the public to make a positive decision today. Better it be deferred for 30 days to allow careful analysis and additional public opinion, perhaps garnered through the social media. 2, if a decision is to be made today, then I believe that this recommendation be turned down completely and unequivocally. 3, this community has waited too long for a visionary project to revitalize the downtown, the heart of any great city. I therefore recommend that you immediately call another RFP, this time on a traditional basis, inviting developers from across the country to submit their creative best to be opened in front of the public on a date certain, and to put a short time frame on it so that the 2014 space requirement deadline can still be met. And now I look at each one of you and say, a redevelopment project focused on the southwest quadrant should be both transformational and foundational. It is the stuff of your legacy for the next 25 years. It requires your foresight, your boldness, and your best judgment. So, I urge you to put aside internal political pressures and loyalties, seek your own counsel, and make the right decision for the future of this community. It deserves much better than what we have before us. We should be prepared to wait a little longer until we have a project that can truly burst our buttons with pride. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryden. I would now like to ask Mr. Naylor, then Mr. Lachensky, then Mr. Yupanix, then Ms. LaBerge. Mr. Yupanix, were you on a tight timeline? Did you want to switch with Mr. Lachensky? So we'll do Mr. Naylor, Mr. Yupanix, Mr. Lachensky, and Ms. LaBerge. Who's Ms. LaBerge? Oh, okay, thank you. Are you on a tight timeline with the switch you're on? Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council.
Is your presentation likely going to exceed 5 minutes? It's
I'll
awful
ask
to be
for-
interrupting people.
May
Could
I
I
ask
get a
for 7
motion
to
to
8
allow
minutes?
these delegations to speak till they're finished? Thank you. It's carried. All in favor? It's carried. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor,
Aye,
members of council, staff, and members of the public. I'd like to thank the public for being here tonight and showing your support for our process. It's really important. My name is Don Naylor, as you heard, and it is a pleasure to be here tonight to speak as chairman of the board of the BDDC, the Brampton Downtown Development Corporation. Professionally, I'm a landscape architect. I have been a consultant to the private and public sectors based here in Brampton for nearly 30 years. During that time, I have had the pleasure of working on over 1,000 files, from the smallest little urban spaces to very large projects where I'm a member of the development team on budgets in excess of $100 million. Before I begin my thoughts and presentation and delegation, I want to take a moment to personally acknowledge the efforts and expertise of the Evaluation Steering Committee and senior staff who authored the 51-page final evaluation document. Mo Lewis, Julian Pattison, John Corbett, Dennis Kudajar, Peter Honeyboard, and Randy Rayson. Your professionalism and expertise shines through in this document. I want to thank you for it. You should be very proud of it.
Can't hear you. Do you need some water, Don, too? Could
I
you
would love some water,
turn
please,
that
if I could.
microphone so it's,
You stop the clock on?
no, you don't. Somebody brought water.
Thank you. As I was saying, thank you. Your professionalism was much appreciated and made it possible for us to evaluate and consider their options. Council, many of you voted to bring City Hall downtown here many years ago. Many of you voted to make the Rose Theatre a reality in downtown. And I'm sure these were very difficult and challenging decisions at that time, not unlike this decision is going to be tonight. Without these key projects, where would downtown Brampton be today? I think of this all the time when I'm trying to craft solutions with the BDDC in the hope of helping downtown succeed and move forward. It's a very difficult thought. So tonight you were being asked to do two things. One, evaluate the merit-based recommendation made by your senior staff on the two qualified submissions. Two, vote for the recommendation that will bring significant urban renewal downtown, or vote against the recommendation that leaves us where we stand today, a downtown with no clear development direction and a population wondering why nothing has happened or moved forward up to this point. Tonight, I ask you to recognize the merits of this outstanding proposal and support your staff recommendation. My reasons, I will make clear right now. The competitive dialogue process brought us the Dominus Zeidler Architect solution. I admit I do not know a lot about Dominus construction. I will rely on the city staff evaluation, and I trust their judgment. I believe they are an outstanding builder of high-rise and commercial developments in Southern Ontario, and I did read that their 2008 gross income, company income was $100 million. That's a respectable figure. Partnering with Zeidler Architects. Now, Zeidler Architects are one of Canada's finest and highest regarded architecture firms. They have over 135 national and international awards for their credit, including 5 Governor General medals for architecture, 4 Massey medals for outstanding Canadian architecture, and 9 awards of excellence for Canadian Architecture magazine. We are very, very fortunate to have this caliber of proposal and development team before us tonight as an option to be selected. I was going to ask for one of the slides to go up, but I trust people have looked at the various pictures in the document and they can remember visually in their minds what the little vignettes look like. On the Dominus team, I'd like to read an excerpt from the conclusion section of the report. The solution, to have a significant city presence in all 4 quadrants of downtown, would provide a true testament to the city's commitment to a vibrant downtown, will serve as a catalyst and create the opportunity for private sector investment and interest. The city's administrative space needs would not only be met, but a central library, parking, and other amenities would be available to meet the public need. I believe this solution will accomplish exactly that. So in context, there are 4 chosen sites, all on city-owned land. It benefits a broad segment of downtown core without a need to expropriate or to threaten heritage buildings. The solution is a commitment to 4 sites And the ultimate solution means that the urban renewal benefits are spread out throughout the downtown with new high-quality architectural that anchor future private sector investment and lay the groundwork for how the supporting outdoor environment needs to respond. Thirdly, the Phase 1 and Phase A projects alone will free up thousands of square feet of municipal occupied downtown space for the private sector to expand into. And we all have stories and examples of medium, small, and large businesses looking for development and expansion opportunities in downtown, and there's simply no available space right now. The urban design fit for this project. There's an immediate understanding for the architecture and its relationship to the public realm. We at the BDDC believe that the public realm master plan is a key strategic priority for 2011. This plan is an immediate start to that process, with many of the parts of the puzzles already put in place with this proposal. Brampton downtown is often lauded as a walkable, friendly core with a unique character and friendly atmosphere. We are fortunate to have this, and you can see from the red zones on the screen, or on the screen if we have the screen up, but in the proposal, that the consideration of how the walking environment can emerge over time is a key part of the public realm renewal opportunity in this plan. The plan puts meaning and rationale to where green spaces might go, to where tree-lined promenade might belong, on where to prioritize pedestrian movement over the automobile, and to where indoor-outdoor uses can best serve the increased foot traffic that will undoubtedly occur with this project. To the retailers, I say, walkers or shoppers, much more foot traffic should be anticipated with this approach. An organized collection of new and heritage architecture is a unique signature of the downtown core. This remains intact. Owners of older buildings will hopefully respond with renewal of their own. Solutions move away from, the dominant solution, moves away from a basic four-corner structure and moves towards a commitment to a downtown core as a whole. George Street will emerge from a secondary street status to a primary street, resolving numerous public realm deficiency in the process. Back streets and alleys can be renewed and take on new personalities of their own. The future library site, Site 2, can thus emerge as a landmark building for downtown Brampton and a true center for the creative economy. That's a very important part of our direction moving forward. I see it as being exactly that on a number of levels. Is Brampton really ready for this caliber of thinking, this creative policy of thinking? Absolutely, I believe it is. If you looked at page C41, there is a library architectural inspiration sketch, just an idea, which looked like a stack of major books. This is a very creative and amazing consideration of how great ideas are born. And this great idea could be reality here in downtown Brampton. What are we afraid of? Opportunities for private sector infill abound in everywhere and in every storefront in this project. Will property values rise? I suspect they will. Now, I recognize that there's a great deal of detailed design work to be done, but we do have a couple of clarification questions that we'd like to put before the evaluation team. Number one is the dominant's proposal cost of $27.62 a square foot for Phase 1 and 1A only. What is the estimated cost per square foot for the subsequent phases, including parking? Number two, are the 433 proposed parking spaces in Phase 1 and 1A proposal net gain spaces? What is the total net gain of parking spaces at build-out of Phase 3 of the dominance plan? Number three, are there any restrictions on surrounding and adjacent landowners for developing their properties in concert with this proposal, either through cooperation down the road or as standalone developments coordinated through the regular site plan approval process? And number four, what commitment will Council make to deliver the complete three-phase project in a timely fashion, and what safeguards will be in place to ensure that the financial plan is fixed through the development period? To wrap up, earlier on I described some of the significant merit-based characteristics that I believe this plan brings to downtown. Should this recommendation be approved tonight, I would like to observe and believe that the following must happen in concert with this initiative. Showing leadership in designing and implementing a 350-year flood protection solution for downtown is number one. Number two, securing approval for the secondary plan special policy area for downtown must happen along with it. Meeting the province's goal for intensification in the downtown core in accordance with the province's Places to Grow legislation. Of course, this has to happen. Now, there are a number of condo applications before downtown at the moment. I'm hoping that these projects will be able to move forward sooner than later. Those key initiatives obviously will occur at the same time or shortly thereafter, because I can't see this revitalization project happening without those pieces of the puzzle falling into place. With hourly GO train service not far away, the scenario for a successful and vibrant downtown is all that more believable and viable in the context of this recommendation tonight. The feds and province will probably be watching, I suspect willing to help, and the message needs to be very clear. I do not believe we will see another opportunity like this before us tonight. So I ask Council, show leadership to the voters who returned you all only 3 short months ago. Do the right thing for all of Brampton tonight. The BDDC endorses a vibrant, exciting, and prosperous downtown. We believe this recommendation will accomplish all of that and more. Thank you.
Staff took note of the questions, so we can go through them towards the end. Mr. Yupanix, you are next up, followed by Mr. Vicensky, followed by Ms. LaBerge. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Yupanix.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, councilors, and staff, I live, work, and play in Brampton. I've lived in Brampton since 1986. I've worked in Brampton, just around the corner, at a firm that was founded in 1924, and I play in Brampton. I played baseball when I first came to Brampton with and against Mr. Paleschi, and tonight I'm playing hockey. Puck drops at 9 o'clock today. Old timers game, and I can't be late because one of the players on my team is 62. We can't double shift him. So I will for sure be less than 5 minutes with my comments today, and if the excess time could be used by Michael Lachensky, I want to commend the staff team. We heard presentations from 3, but I realized when I read through the material, it was the work of more than 3. It was probably the work of about 103. This is beyond Brampton's borders. I know that most of the city staff live, work, and play in Brampton like I do. They had to rely on people beyond Brampton's borders too. An international accounting firm, a national law firm, and architects who are world-renowned. And together, they came up with a knock-your-socks-off proposal. When I saw it, when I read it, I was excited. I was excited for the opportunities for all of us in Brampton. And I was excited like I was when I saw Cassie Campbell. Cassie Campbell, the whole project there,
I mean the rec center, not the hockey player. You're talking about Cassie Campbell Rec Center.
Okay. But that didn't go through. That was an RFP process. That wasn't a public process. And look at the beautiful building, the great ice that we came up with there. Now, what I wanted to mention is the quality. There was comments about the number of bidders. The focus, in my view, should be the quality. The quality. It's fantastic. We have an opportunity now, and I encourage council to seize the opportunity. We've been waiting a long time for something like this. We may never get another opportunity like this. I also happen to be a lawyer, and I was biting my tongue. We have a conflict of interest, and Madam Mayor, you gave someone the opportunity to continue, but a conflict of interest is a conflict of interest. I have no conflicts. So what I ask is that Madam Mayor, councilors, seize the opportunity. Do what's right for all of Brampton. We'll all be proud. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Michael Lachensky.
Is that for me? Thank you.
Did he get a new glass too? Thank you.
I beg council's indulgence for probably